What is up, guys, and welcome to another Bojan vlog. How you guys doing? It just started raining, so if you hear any pitter-pattering in the background, then I do apologize. I swear to God that I make sure to not check weather forecasts before coming out and recording. I mean, who has the luxury to check that shit? And when it's ever right, right? You know, particularly if you live in the UK. But anyway, how you guys doing? If you don't know who I am, which there may be a good chance of, then I'm the, you may remember me from such films as I'm a Covert Narcissist, right? So, by the time this video is out, then my response video to that original video should already have been out, so hopefully you guys have checked that out. And I did say that in the subsequent video I would be tackling something equally contentious. Perhaps not as contentious, but still somewhat contentious, right? So today I'm going to talk about what is in the title of this video, which is autism, right? So interestingly, like in between making my response video to the covert narcissism video, and also making this video, like I kind of received a few more comments, right? And like some of them went along the tune of you know, obviously, like I explained in the response video, you know, it's generally split between the people who have said that like I am not a narcissist, you know, and then people who say that I am a narcissist, right? And it's like, I hope that I did a good enough job in my response video in kind of just expanding on what I was talking about. In terms of like kind of like elucidating, you know, what I was trying to get at with that original narcissism video. It was just me sharing something that I had learned about myself, right? And like, to be honest, I didn't realize just how much like attention is surrounding this kind of a topic, right? And it really speaks to, like I said in my response video, just like how much something like narcissism touches people's lives, right? So anyway, I actually got a few interesting comments thrown in the mix. So one of which said something along the lines of like, well, I wouldn't, like, you know, a lot of people, like, well, a few people have said, you know, like I've dealt with a lot of narcissists, and you don't seem like, just your actions don't kind of match up with the diagnosis, right? And it's like, fair point, right? But then someone, I think there was one comment that even went so far as saying like, perhaps you have like mild Aspergers Syndrome. And that was like a very interesting thing. I was like, you know what? This is not the first time that I have thought about something like that. And interestingly enough, like it kind of coincided with me like having thoughts about the very topic of this video, right? Autism, right? Because alongside of like my thoughts surrounding narcissism, right? Kind of subsequently I had a few further thoughts that kind of leaked into this topic area, right? So like, I guess the commonality is that they're both kind of like personality disorders, right? And they're things that kind of are very heavily charged, right? Or rather, the energy surrounding these topics are, you know, incredibly charged. But and so this video is not quite as personal, I suppose, right? It's like, okay, right, so like someone made that comment, right, about me potentially having mild Asperger's, right, also known as AS, right? And like, to be fair, like I don't really know that much about Aspergers Syndrome and how it differs from autism, you know, and so like, you know, I guess in the same way that I made a video about narcissism without really being like a clinical like psychologist or like psychiatrist or like any type of person like that, right? You know, I don't really have any kind of technical expertise like kind of backing what I'm saying, but but I have heard of it, and like I've had people. I had a friend in secondary school who was diagnosed with Aspergers syndrome, right? And so I don't know if I might have it or not. It's like kind of like a bit of a toss up in the air. But like when I read into the symptoms of Asperger syndrome and how that kind of, I guess, is seen, I guess generally as a milder form of like people on the autistic spectrum, right? Then I'm like nodding my head to it, in the same way that like when I kind of suspected that I may have some narcissistic traits, I had a look at the symptoms and it kind of it ticks all the boxes, right? So I think that there's a good chance that I may have what is known as Asperger syndrome, or at least a very light version of it, right? Because as far as I know, right, the symptoms of Asperger syndrome are basically anything that goes into social interaction and communication skills, and just generally relating with other people. Like I've always had problems with that, or rather, like I've always it's always been difficult for me to do that kind of thing, and like I've always, I guess, come across as awkward. Some of my friends growing up have described me as kind of a weirdo. Just not necessarily even because of my interests, but because of like just sometimes like the way I acted around them. So going a bit deeper, like it's specifically they class it as restricted and repetitive behavior. I have the wiki page up here because, like I say, I'm not an expert on these topics, but like but it's worth reading about these things. But in any case, aside from basically social interaction problems, there's also communication problems, restrictive and repetitive behavior and interests, right? So basically people with AS or autism like tend to have a very narrow and, I guess, abnormally focused kind of set of interests, right? They might be really, really like kind of like obsessed and interested in something, but like kind of be oblivious as to like how that fits into like life in general, or like the broader kind of umbrella that thing falls under, right? So for example, like I'm really big into things like I'm really big into Myers-Briggs type indicator theory, right? For example, just a random example, right? But like, am I really that interested in the kind of like the rigors of like psychology, and like, am I going to go and read like all of Jung's like papers that he wrote and all of this stuff, right? It's like not really, but I just happen to have like a really kind of specific interest in the in the form of MBTI, right? So like that's another thing, and just like and also there's an element of giftedness to people with AS and autism, right? Or who are on the autism spectrum. They tend to be gifted in something. Like generally speaking, it's like it could be academia, right? And I was fairly good at academia, right? Even though I was lazy as fuck, right, and like I didn't really pay attention that much, I basically I did pretty well at academia. Like I'm musically gifted, right? I wouldn't say I'm the most talented, right, but like just compared to the average person, right, like I have like this innate gift for music. I think in a very deep way very easily, right? So the reason I do these vlog entries, in case it wasn't clear, from watching previous entries, is because this is kind of play for me. This is what I do, and it comes so easily. Some people find like numbers really easy, so like they become mathematicians. Like some people find business really easy, so they get into business. Some people find interacting with people very easily, so they get into some kind of social field, right? For me, like kind of like dealing with abstract ideas and kind of talking very deeply and philosophically and looking at like kind of philosophical and intellectual frameworks and kind of like finding patterns in and amongst all of that. So like that's something I find really, really natural. It comes really naturally to me. Like some people might call it downloading, right? You know, if you're in the spiritual kind of spheres, right? You know, like you may have heard people talking about like downloading. You know, if you know, and that's something I, as a spiritual person, I guess, like find very, very natural. You know, I don't want to say it's simple, right? But it is natural to me. It just happens, right? I don't really even have to think about it. It's just like ideas come to me, and I've practiced over many years, like articulating these ideas. So like, even though sometimes, like, I can seem very scatterbrained, and what I'm saying can like be just all over the place and not really have a central point, you know, like a logical locus, if you will. Still, like, you know, this is just what I find natural, right? And so, you know, people on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, and people who have AS, like, they tend to be like unusually gifted in certain areas, right? But be hampered in things that generally go like in the kind of umbrella classification of like social skills and things of that nature, right? And the thing is, like, you know, it's very, from what I've read, right, it's very, very diverse, right? It's very diverse what autism could point towards, right? You know, there's like, for example, there's something known as like high functioning or autistic people, right? Basically people who like, you know, who exhibit symptoms of, you know, the autism spectrum, and yet they can, you know, they have normal jobs. They might even do their jobs really well. You know, they may have great relationships or seemingly great relationships. They may have a lot of contacts, you know. They may be socially confident, right? But like, and so, you know, there's something like that. And then obviously there's people who are really, really kind of like, then there are non-functional, I guess, like, you know, there's non-functional autism, right? And then there's Asperger's, which, you know, is like a milder form, but is somewhat related to, you know, autism. You know, and like, you know, this honestly, like, the more that I read about it, the more like complicated it seems to get, because it's like, you know, it's one of those things that it's like, is it actually a disease? You know, is it actually something that like can be cured? You know, like what are the causes, right? You know, like, is it genetic, or is it like to some degree nurtured? And it's just like, it's just this rabbit hole of like, you know, but like people can generally kind of agree and like get to a consensus about like what the symptoms are, right? So in general, you know, if you have trouble kind of socializing and relating with people, if you seem kind of, yeah, if you seem kind of off rhythm with other people, and if you kind of have like this abnormal obsession with things, and you're kind of blind to like trends, basically, right? That's another one, is like, you know, like you're kind of so engrossed in your own kind of self-interests that you're blind to like what are the kind of trends like in the mainstream and like in your kind of group of people, you know, in your social circle, right? So, you know, and there's like there's a million, like, you know, and that's exaggerating, but like there's like many kind of intermittent, well, not intermittent, but like additional like symptoms and, you know, degrees of which like certain symptoms kind of manifest in people with autism. But so yeah, you know, I just thought that I would touch on like, you know, what I've learned about autism. It's none of it is very technical. It's just very, you know, all I've learned is basically off of Wikipedia, right? But like, the reason I wanted to talk about this topic, right, is, yes, I suppose, like, I have at many points in my life considered the possibility that I may have a mild form of this kind of thing, right? Autism or Asperger's, right? And it would make sense because I tick all of the boxes of, you know, yeah, you know, these of autism, you know, mild autism or like Aspergers syndrome, right? And you know, and I can see the parallel, honestly. So like to that one comment that kind of like made this connection, yeah, potentially, you know, and it's very likely, you know, it's like perhaps what I kind of described within myself as narcissistic traits is merely kind of a manifestation of like symptoms of Asperger's syndrome, you know. The reason I'm so self-absorbed is because like that's a symptom of Asperger's, right? You know, like I have my own interests and I don't really care so much about like what other people are doing, you know, and I've always been that way, right? And it's hard for me to relate to people, you know, particularly when like what they're doing does not interest me in the slightest, right? So, you know, yeah, and like I've talked about how I have like, you know, I've always had like social anxiety, not necessarily in terms of interacting with people. I can kind of interact with people, but like when it gets a bit deeper than that, when like people start when people try to kind of get a bit closer to me, that's kind of when I start to have problems, right? Come up. You know, I have a preference of being like for being alone, and it's just like, yeah, to be honest, I tick all of the boxes, right? And it would make sense, you know. So like, if you were to diagnose me as someone with AS, right? Probably, right? It's like, it would make complete sense, right? And so like, partly the reason I wanted to do this entry was to kind of dig a bit deeper into this potential thing that I have, right? But also another side of it is like, I was thinking about like what are the deeper implications of someone with autism, right? So like, you know, if you yourself have autism, right, it's like, is it just or you suspect yourself as having autism or like, you know, symptoms of Asperger's, you know, syndrome, then is it just this thing that, you know, is seemingly incurable and like will basically serve as an impediment to you kind of going out there and being successful at whatever it is you want to do, right? And like being successful socially and like in terms of like fostering good, healthy relationships and things of that nature, right? And it's like, potentially, you know, potentially, right? However, I have been thinking about this, and I kind of have my own unique take on it, right? In the same way that, like, I have my own unique take on narcissism, pretty much, right? I don't really know the technical, like, technically speaking, like I say, I'm not an expert, right? I'm not really an expert in narcissism, and I'm not really an expert in autism. But, like, I have been doing some thinking of my own, and I have come up with my own kind of take on this, based on my own perspective, you know, and based on, like, my own thinking, right? So, like I say, right, you know, or like I say that I have learned about autism just reading briefly about it, is that, like, it's something that is very verifiable by a great many people, you know, like, everyone can agree on what the symptoms of autism and Asperger's are, right? However, it's something that no one knows what the fuck it comes from, right? You know, no one can really say, you know, or even kind of like profess to know like how we can adequately measure this. Like, what are the causes of autism, right? And so, like, it's kind of a mystery in terms of like, okay, like if you have autism, like, you know, are you just fucked, right? Because I'll tell you how it feels, right, to be like kind of put under such a label. Like, it doesn't feel great, right? It's like, okay, I may have something, you know, I may be autistic slightly, right? Or rather, I may have a very mild version of this, and it's like, it doesn't feel that great, if I'm honest, right? And I'm sure that, like, if you're someone who has been diagnosed with these things, or you suspect that you may have these things, right, I'm sure it's not a great feeling for you also, right? And to be honest with you, like, it kind of feels like someone is kind of pigeonholing you, right? And even that's okay, right? You know, because like we all need like something we all need a name for like that thing that we're struggling with, or like that thing we're trying to overcome, so that we can understand it better, potentially, and try to overcome it. However, like, to be honest, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so like you're telling me that this thing has a name, right? But it doesn't have any kind of meaningful way in like of like curing it, or even like managing it to the extent that like I would not be hampered by it, right? So it's like, so if you have autism, right, are you fucked, right? And really, I think it goes deeper than that, right? I think that the label of autism, right, because it really is a label. It has a collection of symptoms, and like, I'm sure that like people have studied like, what are the differences between people with autism and normal functioning people, right? And it's very clear what those differences are, right? But I think that this is the best that we have in terms of like psychology, in terms of like a scientific kind of study into autism, right? I feel that there are a great number of things, there are a great number of things that go into an individual human being, right? I think that like there are a lot of people who were born, right, and their kind of path through early life was such that they kind of learnt the gist of what it took to be someone normal in society, right? And they were biologically and they were socially wired to do that, right? And that's probably the majority of people, maybe. If I'm being honest, it's probably less than what we tend to think, right? But if you look at the majority of people, like, they seem normal. They seem like they know how to like interact with other people and like abide by the law and like be like, yeah, just like sociable, people, who don't do creeper things and like don't break the law and stuff like that, right? But then there are other people who were born, right, and they were born into a being that was kind of different, right? Really is how you would say it, right? It's like some of us are born different, and for whatever reason, that difference stops us from being able to fully kind of integrate into like the set of societal rules that are kind of imposed on us, right? So what I'm trying to say is that like regardless of like how people act or like how you would classify people in society, I think that like we would all agree that like everyone is different, right? Everyone is an individual, and like no two people are the same, right? We can all agree to like partake in the same things, right? We all have to make money, we all have to stay alive, eat and like clean the house and like make friends and like keep those friends, etc., etc. Like, take care of our families, pull our own weight, get excited for the World Cup, right? Whatever the fuck the case may be, right? It's like, even with those things, like, no one person is the same as any other, right? And I was thinking about this, right? And, well, I mean, I believe, like, I kind of got thinking about this, and it's like, well, what if the people who just were born different, right? Like, either they just kind of like had a kind of like a personality, type, that just was not moldable for just normal society, right? Another way of saying this is like, the strengths that person was given could be, you know, they are gifted in musicianship, right? Or like they have synesthesia, right? And they can like, or they have like a photographic memory, or like or they can learn things at like this accelerated rate, you know, but they can't fucking follow instructions, right? Because really, like, you can boil, you know, societal adherence, I guess, as the ability to follow rules, right? It's just like the difference is what rule you're following, right? You know, it goes from like you will not kill another human being, or you will not steal from another human being, or you will not commit acts of violence against another human being, to like at this certain time of the year, right? Or like every so often there is a thing that happens and you must partake in that thing, right? Or that like there is a system in place where, you know, something emerges, right, in the mass media that you must partake in and have an opinion about, and it would be helpful if that opinion were in consensus with the rest of society, right? And if you were not born with this strength, then it stands to reason that you would have a very difficult time fitting in, right? And this is, I feel, what, you know, people in these clinical professions kind of like label as autism, you know, or Aspergers, right? Really, to me, it just seems like, yeah, you know, obviously there's studies behind it, and, you know, everyone's trying to understand what it means and like how it could potentially cured, right? But I feel that like really what autism and Asperger's syndrome and stuff like that is just a label that people put on like a demographic of people that find it very difficult to be socialized, right? And so they have these symptoms of like, oh, this person doesn't seem to play along well with other people. They seem very self-absorbed. Their set of interests seems very kind of restricted and you know, unusually obsessive, right? They have weird mannerisms. So like another thing that like kind of ties into this is like, you know, usually like people with like autism and like Asperger's, right? They kind of have these weird like kind of they're not quite tics, but like they have these kind of weird regular movements, right? I don't know if you can see it in me, maybe, right? But like they have these movements, and like maybe it doesn't come across in my videos, but like, you know, it's like I could see it, like the way I walk, for example. I walk really upright. You know, a lot of times I don't even realize it, but like I walk super upright, you know, and I stand really like upright. Like, I'm sure my posture's amazing, right? But like it's a bit weird, I guess you could say, right? You know, because most people just walk like normal people. They've got a bit of a slouch, right? They might have a bit of swagger, you know, and they just walk like a normal person would. But like I like, regardless of the situation, I always seem to walk like really upright, right? You know, as an example, right? You know, and it goes even worse. You know, it's just like basically like just weird shit about you, right? If you're like an autistic person, right? You do shit that's weird, right? You know, and then like people tell you that it's weird, but like it's difficult for you to act any differently, because you're like, okay, what do you want me to do? You know, like you can tell me like 50 million times that it's weird, and then eventually I will understand that it's weird, right? But like okay, so you expect me to change then? Right? And I think people honestly do, right? But the thing is that like therein lies what I believe to be really what autism is. Right? I believe autism and Asperger's to be a symptom of one's suppression of self. It only took me half an hour to get here, but I'm finally here, right? Sorry about all the rambling. I guess because I don't have such an emotional charge surrounding this as I did with narcissism, I'm a bit more all over the place, right? Because I'm just doing this entry because I thought it'd be interesting, you know. But like, yeah, that's really what I think it is, right? I think that we're all different, we all have a uniqueness about us, right? And some of us, I guess we're lucky enough to have a uniqueness that can fit in with what society wants from you, right? You know, you were born like really kind of aware of other people's feelings, right? You know, I would say that like I'm not completely oblivious to other people's feelings, but like when it's between my feelings and another person's feelings, I would completely focus on my own. You know, but of course, like I can tell when other people are sad. I can tell when they're angry. You know, and I try to like help that, right? I'm not. It's not as if I'm like someone's really pissed off at me, and I'm like, why the fuck is this person pissed off at me? Not to say that that's wrong, right? You know, again, like I happen to like, you know, I am a bit self-absorbed, right? I am what I call narcissistic, you know, in a sense. But like, I can tell when people are upset with me. I can tell when like there's bad air, right? I can kind of read the air, right? But some people were not born with that, right? And it's like, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like I have things that are weird about me, right? And it's like, but what are you gonna do about it? You know? You know, and that's okay, but then like society tells us that we can't be that way. The thing that you're doing, the way that you're being, you can't be that way. You know, because it's fucking weird, right? You can't walk upright all the time, right? Because it's fucking weird, right? You know, when the World Cup comes on, you better watch that shit, because if you don't, and you're not interested in that, then you're a fucking weirdo, right? You know, in a social gathering, if you're not making jokes, right? If you're not bantering with other people, and if you can't read these cues that signal for you to do a specific thing at a specific time, because you don't feel like doing it, then you're a fucking weirdo, right? So don't do it, right? So like, you get a person, right, who like is disadvantaged in this way, right? They can't read social skill cues as well. They're not as observant in the environment, right? And like, just like their abilities are more intense and focused on specific things that interest them, right? You know, I mean, like, think about the self-esteem of these kids growing up, right? I can vouch, right? I have never thought of myself, like, this is a new thing for me. Like, I've read about it, I've had friends who have showed, like, signs of this thing, you know, but I never considered myself as having it, right? But, like, and like, even then, like, I had, like, very low self-esteem growing up, you know? So think about these kids who are openly told that there's something fucking weird with them, right? Maybe you can relate with this, right? If you happen to have these things, right? But like, it's like, so you go through your life and like your parents are already trying to like condition you out of what you do, right? Your parents are already like, okay, you know, son or daughter, you like, don't do that, you know, like it's weird. You know, they may have the best intentions, like they don't want you to get picked on, right? They don't want you to get singled out in social interactions, right? But like, the message is still the same, right? No matter how much you fucking sugarcoat it, it's like, what you're doing, son or daughter, don't do that. Because you'll get picked on, right? People will think you're weird, right? You know, in a job interview, right? If you're like all like kind of weird and like self-absorbed, right? And not really paying attention to what the interviewers are asking you, and not really like reading like the sub-communication cues properly, then guess what? You're not getting employed. And if you don't get employed, you're not going to have a career, right? So like, they have the best intentions for you, your parents, right? And then this extends like to like school, right? You go to school, right? And like, guess what? The kids pick on you because you're a bit weird, right? You're the last person to fucking like laugh at a joke, or you don't even laugh at a joke, or you laugh at the wrong joke, or like you have this weird, you smile weirdly and people are like, why the fuck are you smiling so weird? You know, why are you staring at me like that? And then like you eventually get singled out as the weird kid, everyone picks on you, right? And like you, as the autistic person that you are, like get pissed off at that shit and start fighting back as you perceive it as self-attack, right? And then like people pick on you even more because like now you're this funny guy that people pick on and you have this really crazy, and I've seen people like this in my school, right? You know, people that get picked on back when I was in school, and they have like the worst reaction to it. They're like, they get pissed off and they start like screaming and like, or like they do something weird, and it's just like, it makes it worse for them. They get picked on more, right? So they're getting picked on, right? So they're already developing this ego that like where they understand that they're the fucking like reject of the group, right? And then your teachers are like, the way that they treat you, like it's like pity basically. They're not proud of you, right? The people around you, like you don't like. It's like, as an autistic person, have you ever felt that people have been proud of you? You know, in the same way that like teachers are proud of like their like valedictorian or like their like class representative or whatever the fuck, right? The cool kid who gets all the good grades and like, would be the one that was picked on a, to be on the cover of a school magazine, and they're in my class, right? This kid, they're in my class, right? Players teaching teachers playing favoritism, and it's like, are people often proud of you when you're like, when you're autistic? Fuck no, right? If anything, like, they have pity on you, right? And they think that like, that makes you feel better about yourself. Oh yeah, it feels great when like my parents and my teachers, and like all of the adults in my life seem to take pity on me. Instead of pride, which they shower on like the kids that like excel and are really popular and are really in the limelight because they so happened to be born and raised with the tools that like that help them, like they were born with the strengths of like being really social and being really likable and blah blah blah, and because of that, like, their parents like showered them with affection, so they have no issues with self-esteem. They're confident in what they do because no one's told them that what they do is weird and they shouldn't fucking do it, right? Do you think that under these circumstances that you could potentially develop symptoms where you're fucking awkward around people? I finally got it out. Like, the start of this entry was kind of a bit rocky because, like, honestly, I've been thinking about this topic for a while, right? But like, yeah, I got into it. I finally got into it. So, if you ask me, right, and I know this is very controversial. This is very like, what the fuck is this guy even saying? Like, he's saying he's not an expert and he's saying all of this shit like he knows what he's talking about. Should I listen to him? I don't know, but like, this is what I came to myself. Again, I don't know if I have Aspergers Syndrome. I suspect I may. Right? But if you were to ask me what I really think about what this thing of like autism and Asperger's Syndrome is, for all of you out there, who are affected by this, if you want to know my opinion, I think that it is a label. These things are labels for the collection of symptoms that are exhibited by people whose subjective experience is completely steamrolled, right? It's not even allowed out, like, to come to the surface, right? Because it was beaten out of them from early fucking age, right? The minute that the parents discovered that, that their kid was autistic, they did everything under the sun to lovingly squeeze it out of them. Right, because to them it's like, I don't want my kids to be picked on. I don't want my kids to have a bad life. But what they don't realize, right? What they don't realize is that they just destroyed their children, right? And it's tragic, right? Because it's like I said, it's loving. I'm not being facetious here. Like, it's true. Like, parents always want the best for their children, right? It's just that like they have to like play this tug of war between like, I want my child to be happy, but I also don't want my child to be a failure. Because if they're a failure, they're going to be miserable as fuck, right? So like, they're doing it out of love, but like, they don't realize that they're destroying their fucking children. Because what are they really doing? They are snuffing out and demonizing the authenticity and the uniqueness of that person. That's what causes autism. That's what autism and Asperger's Syndrome are, right? You can argue with me. Feel free to argue with me, because you might be thinking, well, that's a bit of a long shot, Bo. You know, not to mention that you're not really an expert, you know. It's like, that's a bit of a long shot. You're saying that, like, there's actually nothing wrong with these people. Because that's kind of what I'm catching from you right now. And it's like, I don't know. Obviously, there's something wrong with these people to some people. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this whole fucking rigmarole about it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be, like, now a fucking derogatory thing that you say to people. So for those of you who aren't familiar with, like, cancerous YouTube comments, right? Or any comments of any sort, like on Reddit and all these new places, right? Autistic is now like an insult you say to people. I remember a time when the term autistic and autism were technical terms that you used to, like, categorize these people, like, in terms of, like from a medical perspective, I suppose, right? But it is now, when I hear the word autistic, it has the same adverse reaction in my body as when I hear someone saying, like calling someone by, like, you know, like a racial slur, right? So obviously, it's wrong to some people, right? And those are the people that probably, like, you know, need this term, because it's like, okay, like, these are a bunch of people that we don't understand, right? You know, it's like, we're just trying to be normal, but these people can't be normal, and we don't know what's wrong with them, and we wish we could help them, but we don't know what's wrong with them because they can't relate with us, we can't relate with them, really. They're in their own world. So, like, as much as we hate it, we're gonna just have to label these guys and give them a label: autism, Aspergers, because we want to understand, but we don't understand what's wrong with these people. Aren't differences between human beings scary, right? Aren't they scary, right? They're so scary. They're scary because, like, people can just, like, diagnose other people as having a problem, you know? Am I saying they don't have a problem? I don't fucking know, right? Like, if someone came up to me and they did something weird that I didn't understand, like, would I automatically be like, oh, you know what, that person's just being unique. That person's just being fucking themselves, you know, and I should just give them space to be themselves and validate them for it. Like, I probably wouldn't be thinking that. So I'm all high and mighty here being like, you know, fucking these people are treating, you know, potentially myself and other people wrongly. If I see someone acting weird, like, my first reaction would be like, this person's weird, right? So, like, I don't know, it's the answer, right, you know? Like, back in school, right, I'll even be honest about this, right, you know, like, I wanted a lot of times to side with the people who weren't being picked on. And this is a very, very controversial, and I don't know why I just revealed it about myself, but I'm just like, I'm someone who just, like, you know, I just want to be honest, right? It's like, I was, like, you know, I was picked on in school, occasionally, not all the time, like, you know, honestly, it was very occasional, right, that I was picked on. But I was picked on, right? And I was picked on enough to the extent that I would not want to be picked on. And so, like, I recognize that, like, in school, you have a choice between siding with the people who are doing the bullying, right? Or who are, like, doing, you know, who are the normal kids, and the side who are, like, of the weirdos, right? And which side are you going to honestly pick, right? You know? And sure, if you pick the side I'm picking, then you're a fucking piece of shit, right? You are, right? I was a fucking piece of shit when I was in school, you know? I wish I could go back, you know, 10 years or more and slap the shit out of myself and be like, hey, you're being a fucking cunt, right? Because, you know, this kid's being picked on, your friend's being picked on, or, like, you know, the person that talks to you that you know has, like, some form of autism, and you're siding with the people who are picking on him. Because you yourself don't want to be picked on. You're a piece of shit. Wake up, right? That's what I would do, right? Within reason. But, you know, it's like, but, like, the thing is that, like, why is there not a cure, you know? Why are people still saying that this is a problem, right? And, like, I don't know. Yeah, like I say, it's you know, it's obviously a problem to some people, but, like, what about the people who are actually affected by this? Are you gonna treat them as subhumans? You know? You could, right? But like perhaps like the reason that they have such great difficulty in society is because like they were just born in a different way, right? Everyone's unique, but some people are just unique in the wrong way, right? And the thing that we label as autism, as Asperger's, is what happens when you teach someone to distrust how they are naturally because it doesn't fit with societal rules and etiquette, right? You can't have this random weird guy like fucking like picking his nose and shit, right? Or saying like and like stuttering and like or whatever the fuck weird shit they do, right? You can't have them do that, you know, and expect them to make friends and expect them to be liked by other people and expect them to be hired for jobs, right? You can't expect that shit, right? So what's the solution? Well, I can give you a solution in the same way that I gave a solution about narcissism, right? But it's not going to be like oh, take this pill. It's gonna, you know, now that we know the problem, you know, everything's going to be fine. No, nothing's going to be fine. Well, okay, sorry, I'm getting a bit like too I'm getting a bit too hyped up right now. But like, let me kind of steady myself. So, the solution is to do the courageous thing, right? Whether you're an autism sufferer yourself, or you are connected with a loved one, maybe you're a parent of an autistic child, or maybe you know someone in your family or close friends who has this, right? You know, is to have the courage to encourage them to be themselves as much as possible. You know, and see what it is that they really resonate with. Okay, so let me append something to that. Like, the world is not perfect. Like, it's like we can't be ourselves completely all the time, right? So this is me already contradicting myself, but it's like, you know, but it's like you're making a big but it's not a black and white thing. It's like it's a continuum, right? But like, you are making a major mistake if you are trying to mold yourself or someone else into this very general mold, and it's not working, right? What you should be doing is understanding yourself, if you happen to be the autistic person, or trying to understand the other person and see what gifts that they have that they could potentially develop, right? And the challenge is that these people will tend to have very standard gifts. They're not going to be like a lawyer or a doctor or any other thing that's really like that's society, that's like widely known and like generally accepted. It's not going to be that, right? But you have to be courageous enough, and it's okay if the damage is already done. The damage will always be done, right? That's the thing. It's like, hell, that's just that's just the human experience, right? Shit will happen to us, you know. Like, I wish it was different. I really do. But like, the thing is, like, shit happens to you as a human being, right? You will have this shit done to you if you're autistic, right? You will be hurt by narcissists, you know? You will be, right? And it's like, and yeah, it sucks. It does, right? It's like, all of our pain is legitimate. All of like what we're struggling with is legitimate. Never diminish what you're struggling with. Like the pain that you, like, never let anyone tell you, if you're watching this and I'm pissing you off, I said this last video, but like, just like post a comment and say, fuck you. You know, I think you're a piece of shit. You know, I think you're a piece of shit. I think that nothing you're saying is remotely accurate. And I think you're full of yourself, and I think you're delusional. I think you need to see like a professional. You know? Fair enough. Fair fucking enough, right? Because guess what? That's your truth, right? I'm saying my truth, you have a right to say yours, right? You know, you have a right to like say whatever like is pissing you off or whatever is hurting you. You know. But the thing is that like once that shit has happened, because it will happen, right? And you have eventually some like semblance of awareness, right? Maybe you've been hurt so much you're like desperate to try something new, you know, or you're just so fed up that now's your turning point in your life where you're like, you know, I don't know what to do. I'm so broken, but I can't stand this anymore. I need to I need to do something about this. I need to hear something different, right? And you're at the right place. I'm joking. You know, once the damage has been done, you need to then have the courage to explore, right? Explore. Because you have a choice, basically, right? And I'm giving it very kind of straight right now. It's like you have a choice, okay? And don't worry, like you don't have to make this choice necessarily today. You don't have to make it tomorrow even. You don't even have to make it for the next few years, right? But like it's good to think about this choice because this is the choice that you will ultimately have. As an autistic person, as someone with AS, as a narcissist, as a psychopath, as whatever it is, whatever the fuck label that they've assigned to you, right? You have a choice, right? You can either break out of it and figure out some way that you can at least be primarily yourself in such a way that fulfills you and can then bring value to other people, right? And that might take some digging. It might take a lot of digging. It took me a few years, right, to even get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see what I could do here, right? It was years of confusion and not knowing what the fuck I was doing before I even got to a point where I was like, okay, I still don't really know what I'm doing, but like, I know that I don't want to do what people told me to do. And how angry I was, like, you know, when I first, like, you know, awakened and shit. I was fucking pissed. I was pissed, man. I was like, they lied to me. No, that's how I felt. But like, obviously, but the translation of that is like, I should have realized all along that I am not this person that people are trying to make me into. I now know that it was an act of love, right? People don't like, it's like generally people don't want to fuck you over. People don't want to fuck people over in general. Or rather, it's not healthy to think that they would, right? Rather, it's like people like, they're not trying to be assholes outright. But it's just that like, they're just doing what like, they're giving their best like stab at it, which is like, okay, like, you know, let's at least set them on the societal route. Because then like, even if they do fail, they'll have like options in the future, right? And I'm appreciative, honestly. Like, I'm appreciative to have gone through like all of the shit I have, right? Even if I hated it at the time. I got through school, right, and I hated school. I'm going to be honest, right, I fucking hated school. But like going to school and going to university taught me so many things and so many skills and like filled my head with knowledge. And even though like for the first half of my 20s, like all of that knowledge like I realized was secondhand and vicariously gotten, right? Before I then started to like slowly kind of fill my cup with experiences so that I could link those experiences to like the knowledge to give them meaning. But you know, yeah, I went through a ton of shit. I did like my early 20s. I did like so many weird jobs like that I fucking hated, and I was just like depressed and like in despair, and I didn't know what the fuck I was gonna do for myself. You know, I didn't know how like. I don't know, like, what was the point of even living if life was going to be misery for the rest of my life? Okay, so you're out of school. Okay, so you surmounted that hurdle. And then now you got to work in a fucking job for the rest of your life. Good luck, son, right? It's like that feeling, oh God. If you're there right now, like, I have every, like, I'm my sympathy to you, because I went through that too. You know, it's fucking, it's horrible. It's horrible. But nonetheless, you will ultimately have a choice, right? So you can start thinking about it now, right? And there's no pressure to act, just think about it. Is you have a choice. You can either try to figure yourself out and like take some time, take some space away, right? To think for yourself and to come and to like start to like think about, okay, why am I in this situation? Right? How do I feel? Who am I? What do I want to become? Why do people see me the way they do? And like, you just start like following the breadcrumbs, right? Of like you're just trying to understand why. Why are you here? Can life be better? I want to try and at least like understand, you know, I'm so desperate, I just want to try something, you know, drastic. Fair enough, right? But you can eventually get to a point where you know yourself well enough that you're like, okay, I could potentially like follow my own natural strengths and build something that will be of value to both myself and other people, right? Which is the path that I'm on, and I hope it's the path that you're on, right? Or you can continue to be autistic, right? So I've already told you what autism to me means. You can disagree, right? The technical definition is not really what it's not really the important thing in this entry for me, right? It's like, what is actually happening? I'll say it once again. Autism, in my opinion, is, and all shades of it, Aspergers Syndrome, like highly functional, whatever, right? All sorts of it, is suppression of your authenticity. Of who you truly are, of what you're truly good at, and what you truly love, right? And that's why you act so weird, right? Because there's so much pressure on you, and like, you're automatically like, you know, you might be like, ugh. And like, it's just like, because you're thinking like, oh, I can't act the way that I normally act because I'm going to be weird, so I'm going to try and act like this person's acting. They're normal, and then you try it, and you're fucking awkward because you're just doing it like, you're fighting against yourself, right? So it's not coming as naturally from you as someone who naturally does this shit, right? Someone who is naturally normal and like can read cues, like social cues, and can follow trends. They're doing that shit naturally, or at least more natural than you, right? But you're like, I want to do this, but I can't do it. Instead, I gotta do this. Okay, here I go. And you do it, and it's fucking weird, right? Is that surprising to you, right? Anyone watching this right now, is that fucking surprising to you? Because it kind of makes sense to me when I think of it that way, right? You know. So yeah, you have a choice, basically, you know. And I'm sorry for being so like seemingly aggressive in this entry. It's just like, I feel like it makes for better entertainment when I'm talking a lot of shit anyway, and like being really like kind of like animated about it and angry. But like, I want to give one last disclaimer, which is that like, yeah, again, like I'm a fucking idiot. You know, if it's not clear from my videos, I'm a fucking idiot. I have all of these harebrained thoughts, but like even I don't really take them that seriously. Or like I know that they're not the be all and end all, right? And so like if anything I say rubs you the wrong way, then I apologize. You know, I really do. You know, I don't mean to offend anyone. I don't mean to like step on anyone's toes. I'm just expressing myself, really. You know? And like I say, like, you have every right to click away or anything you want, right? So I hope that's clear. Like, that's one that's honestly, like, I don't want to make an enemy out of people, right? So like, I want to at least make that clear about these videos. I can say whatever bullshit I want, right? But I just want that to be clear, is that like, what I say is just me just talking and like speaking my mind. I'm not like trying to like further some kind of agenda here, or feed or be a proponent for some ideology. No, not really. I like ideologies. I like exploring ideas, and I like exploring different ways of framing things. That's just what I like doing. Like I said, it's something that I really, really enjoy, and that's why my vlog channel exists, right? However, the line that should be drawn is like, if anything I say at any point is offensive, then like, just know that like, I think your kind of like own even happiness is more important than someone like saying a bunch of shit that upsets you. You know, fuck me. Seriously, fuck me, right? Like, I'm a piece of shit. Like, who cares about what this rando is saying, you know? Your happiness is more important. Unless, of course, you're finding what I'm saying interesting, you know? And, yeah, you know, but like, that's just what I think, right? And it's like, yeah, it's difficult, you know, in the same way with my narcissism videos. Like, you know, yes, I talked about, it's the same solution, you know? Would you believe it? Don't you believe it, right? It's like the same fucking solution, right? You have a choice. You can either own yourself and find some way to meet with society where you can at least give value to society. It'll be in your own weird way, but at least you're owning it now. And you're no longer fighting against yourself. Or you can continue to fight against yourself. And continue to try and be like, you know, like a cubicle worker, like go to the pub with friends, or maybe you don't even have friends. Maybe you just go to work and it's fucking depressing, you know. You can continue to do that shit. And maybe your mom will love you, but does she really love you? Oh god, okay, maybe I shouldn't go there. Maybe I shouldn't go there. But like, you know, the reason I say this shit sometimes, this dark shit, is because like I've thought about it myself. I feel like it's way better to think about dark shit than to like not think about it. Right? I'm not really one who thinks like, oh, like if you think too much you'll go crazy. I'm not really one of those people. Like, yeah, sure, like you might open Pandora's box. Right? But it's like, okay, well, you know, it's your choice. You can open Pandora's box and all of this like weird shit, like, you know, shit that you never in a million years wanted to like learn about yourself comes out. And you're like, no. You know, or you can continue to like live in ignorant bliss. It's up to you, right? That's the great thing, well, the great and terrible thing is like, no one's forcing you to do anything. Not even some idiot on the internet who thinks he knows what he's talking about, right? So in closing, I welcome comments once again, like, you know, yeah, you know, it's like, it's obvious that like a lot of people have a lot of thoughts surrounding things like narcissism and like, just these problems that people have, and it's like, I just want to give my own individual perspective. You know, even from the point of view that, like, at least more people watch my videos, right, you know, and, like, we can get, like, a discussion going or something, like, you know, yeah, I want more views. Gotcha! No, I'm joking. Or am I? Anyway, yeah, so, in summary, everyone's unique. You know, everyone's different. It helps in some ways that we can come together and form a consensus on things. It seems like I've been shitting on society a lot. Not only in this video, but like you might see a tendency across all of my videos that I tend to like fucking like complain about society all the time. Like, fucking society, am I right? Fuck that shit, right? It's like, yeah, I do a lot of complaining about society, but like, you know what's cool about society is like, we can come together in spite of our differences and do things together and reach consensuses on things. Consensuses? Consensi? I don't know what the plural of that word is, but anyway. And, you know what? Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? And sometimes, you know what? It helps. You know, it helps to be able to, like, sacrifice a bit of your integrity just, like, so you can get along with people. Right? You know, I know I'm very gung-ho about, like, hey, like, you know, societal, like, or rather, like, be yourself, motherfucker. Do what you love. Tell everyone else to fuck off. Because, you know, it's all about you. Get your dreams. You know, don't let any of those people tell you otherwise. And it's like, yeah, I do a lot. I do a bit of that. More than just a bit. But, like, at the same time, it's like, well, you know, if you can do something that's like, you know, a bit, maybe you take a bit of time out of what you're really passionate about and you do this for someone, it'll make them happy as long as they understand what you're ultimately trying to do. Really, it's all about compromise at the end of the day anyway, right? But what you're trying to do is to, like, at least get who you are at the forefront. And then if you need to, like, you know, self-sacrifice a bit just so that you can get along with people, you know, and, like, you know, understand each other, then great. But, like, don't, like, live with who you truly are, like underneath the surface, right? Don't do that. You know, even if you think that people laugh at you for it, like at least wear it on your sleeve, and like eventually you will understand that, like, you know, people laugh at that shit. Maybe it's because like they're not as happy as you. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about that, like, if you have some weird obsessive interest, right? You might be alone a lot of times in your interest or whatever. Like, you know, you have your problems as an autistic person. Maybe just stop saying that, but I don't mean it like in a derogatory sense, but like, maybe they're jealous is one way of thinking about it, you know. And obviously, like, when you realize that, it shouldn't make you contemptuous of them. It should make you be like less like, okay, so when they make fun of me, if they do, it's because like they lack something that I like, this thing that I have, that I can pour all of my love into, right? And like, my goal is not really to force them to see things my way, because that, I realize going through the journey of like being the not cool kid and being singled out as being weird, I know what it feels like for people to try and force you to not be yourself. So you know that. You know how that feels, so you're not going to do it to other people, right? Or at least I hope you don't. I hope I don't. Well, it's one of those, you know, it's human nature, right? But like, what I'm saying is the temptation will always be there, right? The possibility will always be there. But you know the pain, so you're less likely to do it, right? And so you're going to become an advocate for not only the thing that you love, but for like openness. You know, you can love your thing, and like I can love my thing. And like on the days that you're bored of the thing that you like, you can come here and like we'll try and make it as hospitable for you as possible. I can learn a few things about what you're doing so that I can better, you know, facilitate your thing. But I'm not a fucking suppressed soul, right? Meaning that like I actually have a bit of energy to do that. And my thing stops recording at the very last second. That's okay. Hopefully it wasn't for very long. You know, so yeah. So like, you will become like this bridge, right? If you follow through, if you have the courage to trust yourself, you know. But you know, you do need a bit of like restraint as well. It's an art form, right? Because you need to learn like when you're hurting other people or when you're doing something that's self-destructive, right? That's the thing, is that's really the art form that you need to master. Is like, you need to be able to own what you like, because it's what you love, right? You know, woe betide you if you forsake what you love, right? However, you then also want to like package everything else in your life that comes from that, or on the back end of that, right? To like create as much societal like value as possible, right? And yeah, you know, maybe your thing won't be for everyone, but like, you know, for the people who are curious, right, you can be that person who's like, okay, yeah, come on in, I'll show you my world, right? You know, whether it be Pokemon or like fucking, I don't know, S&M, you know, whatever the fuck it is, right? You know, you can be the bridge that brings people in, right? Because one thing that you will learn, and this is not just confined with like this topic right here, but this is a general thing for life, right? When you go courageously in the direction of what you believe in, right, you will learn what it means. You will not own merely the things that you love, right? I've talked about this point many times in entries, right? It's not just, you won't just get more things that you like, but you will learn the feeling of love. And that feeling of love will become a fucking, like, invaluable tool, ally, asset for you to spread good in the world, right? Because you trust yourself. That's really all it is at the end of the day, right? Someone who doesn't trust themselves is someone who, like, acts like weird and, like, is, like, you know, autistic, really. That was the point of my video, right? But like, if you can own yourself and continue to own yourself and continue to own the things that you love, you will eventually realize it's all about beauty. That's one of my latest realizations, by the way. I'll share this last thing with you before I go. It's been a long entry. I actually realized this many years ago, but it wasn't at the same depth. I realized this one thing in my life, but with substantially more depth now. Back in 2010, 11, I can't remember which year it was exactly, like, I wrote a thing down because one night I just had like a massive eureka moment. I finally realized that, like, you know what, fuck this shit. Like, I'm on a graduate scheme, but fuck it. I'm gonna make a plan and do music, right? It was like that around that time frame, right? But like, I woke up one day, and like I had just had this crazy like eureka moment, and like I wrote a lot of shit down. And one of the things I wrote down was, my purpose is to find beauty, even in the darkness. That's something I wrote down, like, roughly speaking, right? But that word beauty is now emerging as something that is like central to me. And like, I'm realizing more and more that like, beauty is not only localized in the things that I used to love, right? But it can be found anywhere. But you can only arrive at that stage when you've allowed yourself to love the things that you love, right? Because again, the thing that you get at the end of this is self-trust, self-ownership, and self-love, right? And that becomes its own entity, which you can then infuse, even in this grey shithole. I live in London, right? And it's like, a lot of it is grey and depressing, right? You know, you know, I'm going to be honest, right? You know, shoot me if you will, right? You know, some people might disagree. Maybe I just haven't found... The weird thing about London is, like, there's pockets of really, really, like, beautiful, like, conscious stuff. But then the rest of it is kind of grey and, like, dirty and grimy, right? And depressing. And grim. But, like, beauty can emerge from these places, right? But it takes a lot of work before you have like that feeling strong enough within you that you can go out and tackle it and be like, okay, I'm gonna make my surroundings beautiful. It takes work. It takes a lot of work, if I'm honest, right? So you better get started now, is what I'm trying to say. So cool. That was my entry. I hope it was insightful. Again, I'm no expert. Like, I keep saying this, but like, you know, I guess I feel like I should keep giving my disclaimer of like, I'm not an expert. Do not take like the technical aspects of what I'm saying that seriously. You know, if I say something that's wrong, if you know what you're talking about, and I say something that's completely wrong, correct me, but just know that like, I'm a fucking idiot. Like, so please be merciful, is what I'm trying to say. So anyway. But, you know, but at the same time, express your opinions. You know, if you think what I'm saying is bullshit, say that, you know, and say why. You know, if you think what I'm saying is the best thing since sliced bread, say that also. It's really up to you. But I really hope that you will continue to watch my videos and subscribe if you want to see more of this stuff. Like, I don't know, who knows, right? Like, this is really something that I do. Like I said, at some point I was hoping that maybe I could make something out of this channel. But, like, at the moment, I'm just, like, doing it as a means to, I'm doing it as just like a means for expressing myself, right? But like, who knows, maybe if I get more and more interest on this channel, I can start to talk about things that people want to talk about, give my own spin on things. We'll see, you know, I don't want to give any guarantees, but like, I'm open to that, you know, I'm open to that. But anyway, thank you once again for watching this, guys. I really appreciate you watching this. But yeah, I'll catch you in the next video where I think things will die down a bit. You know, well, we'll see, you know, unless I have some other crazy idea for some other like really controversial thing, then I'll talk about that, but like, we'll see. So cool. Oh, I might as well plug my other stuff. Like, I have a music channel where I make like dreamy, jazzy like stuff, right? Bojinian Sounds, check that out. I also do a gaming channel if you're interested, where I play like weird games and, you know, games from my childhood and stuff like that. So like, if you're at all interested in those things, and like, you know, feel free to check that out. But yeah, so cool. Oh yeah, I do live streams as well. So like, if you want to kind of check, but it's more for my music, right? It's not really for this. Like, But you know, if you're bored one day and then you want to say hi, then feel free to drop by my stream. It's stream. Stream. It's on my channel, Bojinjin Sounds. Right. I stream like during the weekdays, yeah, usually between like 6 and midnight ish. Right. So cool. If you're interested in that, check me out at your leisure. So cool. Thank you for watching this, guys, and I'll catch you in the next Bojinjin vlog. Until then, I hope you all stay healthy, stay safe, stay intelligent. You know, don't go dumb on me. Joking. And yeah, you know, I hope you'll keep going towards your dreams. And did I even answer the main question in this entry? Am I autistic or not? Probably. The point, like, okay, the point is like, one more thing. It's like, the point is like, labels are useful, but they're not like the end of the world, right? Maybe like this, it will piss some people off, like how I make light of these things that like have so much charge in their lives. Maybe that's what pisses people off. Is like, I'm just like, you know, it's like, you know, I'm kind of like, you know, dancing around it and stuff. But I feel that it's also useful to like adopt the perspective of like, you know, maybe you should think about yourself as more than just a fucking label, right? Because then you're missing out on like all of the cool things that you could do in life. All of the cool stuff that you could do for other people in life, right? I'm spitting all over the place because I'm getting hungry. Anyway, so cool, like, yeah, you know, so, yeah, so cool. I'll finally end this entry here. So cool. Thank you for watching this, guys, and I'll catch you in the next entry. Peace out. Bye-bye now!